quite close. I would have put some lipstick on if I knew it was going to be on the video. Robert poured himself a cup of coffee and leaned back against the window in the waiting room, eyes closed, feeling the cold of the glass through his shirt wake him up a little. Mr. McGregor? He opened his eyes and found Margaret Maynard striding towards him. He stared at her, wondering if he'd conjured her up out of thin air. I'm sorry, I should have called. I forgot about our meeting. Romeo is... I know, I've been talking to the police. This isn't a good... Anna rushed through the door. Robert! She grasped his hands. He's good. He's stable. The neurosurgeon will get here in the morning. I'll stay with Romeo. You go get something to eat. He gestured to Margaret. I have to... Anna's smile flinched into a scowl as she recognised her. What the hell are you doing here? Margaret's face had paled. Anna, For God's sake! Anna threw her hands in the air. Colin is here for Laurel, not me. Can't you leave him alone for 5 fucking minutes? Anna, Robert touched his shoulder. Margaret is here to see me. She's Romeo's caseworker. What? Anna frowned. But how? I don't know. I have no idea. Margaret stepped back. I'm going back to my hotel. It's directly across the road. Can I talk to you as soon as possible, please, Mr. McGregor? Margaret sat at the bar of her hotel and drank 3 glasses of Pinot Noir in quick succession. She heard Robert's long, steady stride approach and swivelled in her chair to look up at him. I can't believe you're Laurel's grandmother, he said, shocked. How the hell did that happen? That woman... She gulped down the wine in her glass and tapped it on the bar, signalling she wanted it refilled. Her voice shook. She ruined his life? How did she manage to do that? Romeo sat next to her, resting his elbows on the bar. When the bartender approached, he shook his head. She made it impossible for my son to have any sort of meaningful relationship, Margaret shivered. She... He looks like a full-grown man to me. He's been an empty shell for 15 years. She emptied her glass in one long gulp. Robert gazed at the ruby-coloured liquid as it disappeared into her mouth. If anyone's life was ruined, it was hers. You don't know what you're talking about. I don't care about your poor Colin. His voice sank to a low, menacing rumble. And I don't care about your ridiculous resentment of Anna. I care about Romeo, a 16-year-old boy who's hurt because some idiot let his father, a violent criminal, out of prison after serving only 2 months of a 3-year sentence. Margaret felt the blood leach out of her face. That is not my fault, Mr. McGregor. Then whose fault is it? She turned towards him, her mouth a tight, white line. Do you know how many cases I've handled over the last 15 years? Thousands. Half the time I don't even know what happens to these kids before I get more and more and more files piled onto my desk. She flexed her fingers around the stem of her wine glass. I try my best, Mr. McGregor, and if that isn't good enough for you, you can go to hell. You go to hell, Robert said. One thing I know for sure, if you'd been aware of Anna's connection to me, you'd never given me custody of Romeo. You would have put him straight into a boys' home out of spite. Would she have? She couldn't say. Bile-laced shame surged into her stomach. If I'd done that, he wouldn't be in a coma now, would he? He threw himself out of his seat and stalked away, shoulders hunched, his fists clenching and unclenching. He didn't seem to hear the click of her heels on the parquet floor behind him as she ran to catch up. He made it outside the hotel before she caught up with him. She reached out and caught his arm. God, I didn't mean it, I'm sorry. Robert swung around, yanking his arm up. He pulled free. He glared down at her, his face granite. Margaret stared up at him, her mouth slackened with shock. He wanted her. She could see it. The pool of emotion, frozen inside her since that horrific 17th birthday party, cracked open. She reached up and touched his cheek, warm and welcoming beneath her fingers. He didn't move, but his gaze pulled her in. She clasped his face